Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's financial education webinar on breaking free strategies to crush your debt. My name is Vincent Delgado. I'm the education outreach manager here at Ceslock Credit Union. Just a quick heads up, if it does sound like it, yes, I am just getting over a little bit of a cold. It seems as if probably everybody's getting over something, so I do sound a little bit nasally. I apologize. So if I do mute myself for a second and cough or whatnot, please be patient with me. I appreciate your understanding, but as I talk to more and more people, it seems as if everybody's getting over some type of illness right now. All right, a few more housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar. So if you need to jump off the presentation early, if you need to revisit something that was shared, if you want to pass this webinar on to a friend, a family member, you name it, someone you know that could benefit from this presentation or this content that's being shared, you will get a recording. Shortly after the webinar, either later today or tomorrow morning, you'll get an email from me with a link to the recording. So feel free to view that whenever you'd like. We do encourage questions and interaction throughout the webinar. There should be a chat box or a Q&A box somewhere on your device. For me, it's at the top of the screen. For you, it could be somewhere else. But again, any and all questions are appreciated and welcomed. If the timing is right, I might stop mid-presentation and take a look at some of the questions, or we may allow ourselves some time at the end to answer some of those questions as well too. But regardless, don't forget it, and you might as well just put it in the chat box, and obviously I'll get to it, when the timing persists throughout the webinar. Let's see. Oops, sorry, I jumped back here. Give me one more second. Um, sorry. Okay. Lastly, for those of you that have attended webinars in the past, you know that this is a reoccurring series that we do every single month. We switch between webinars and in-person presentations. Next month, our presentation is going to be on March 19th, Wednesday, around the same time. And it'll be on the psychology of spending. And then in April, I believe we're going to be doing an in-person presentation revolving around some retirement planning and retirement accounts, a Q&A with our wealth management advisor. So that's just a preview of what's to come here with a couple of our other financial education presentations. So we always appreciate you joining. As it relates to today's presentation, what you can expect. We're going to do a little brief overview of what we're going to talk about in terms of strategies to decrease your debt. First, we're going to talk a little bit about understanding your debt, going over what are some of the stressors that we're all dealing with. We're going to talk about setting up a debt repayment plan or goals. We're going to talk about certain strategies that you could apply to decreasing your debt. We'll share some tips on avoiding new debt, and then we'll share another slide with some resources, and then, as always, have an opportunity for a question and answer. Okay. 1 second here. All right, so the current state of affairs. Just a heads up, some of the stats I'm going to share from a Federal Reserve Bank of New York study done right at the tail end of last year in December of 2024. To no surprise, debt unfortunately is affecting our health. 48% of Americans think their household debt is affecting their health. Credit card debt is honestly one of the more common concerns. This is the type of debt that American households are struggling with the most. 51% of folks say that they are struggling with it, followed by debt from mortgages, 18%, and student loans, 15%. And the forecast calls for more debt. Nearly 2 in 5 people expect their household debt to increase in the next 12 months. And so this isn't to set up a doom and gloom scenario. It's really just to level set with everybody that, a lot of us are struggling with debt. A lot of us have the same stressors. And, with the uncertainty and the way things are going, you never know if your debt's going to increase or decrease. And so it's important that we begin to think about and understand some of our debt and make sure that we're prioritizing decreasing our debt. A lot of folks have this as a goal for this coming year to decrease debt? Maybe it's been a constant goal for you and you're just, struggling. It feels like you're kind of in some quicksand. This presentation today will help share some ideas and share some strategies to help, improve our health, alleviate some of our stress, and allow us to have a little bit more of a positive outlook as we begin to think about our debt that we carry. You know, for most Americans, debt is kind of a common part of life. But I think it's important to understand that not all debts are created equal. There is, per se, some good debt, and there is, maybe some bad debt. Many people, we saw in the previous statistic that there's credit card debt, and that stresses a lot of people out. There's mortgages at a smaller percentage that are stressing people out, and student loans that are stressing people out. Not every single one of these debts is created equal in the sense that, they're not all that bad for you. I think it's important to recognize your good debt between your bad debt. Good debt can help borrowers accomplish an objective or help them avoid a bad outcome. That's one really great way to look at it. Good debt is also more likely to have a lower interest rate or a lower annual percentage rate than bad debt. Bad debt like credit cards is going to have that higher interest rate, as we're all aware. So think of, for example, student loans. Student loans are probably the most common example of good debt, given the correlation between a college degree and higher earning potential throughout the career. Another good example is a mortgage. That could also be viewed as something that has good debt because when you engage in a mortgage, yes, you're taking on a large sum of debt, but that's also going to increase in value as we've seen, especially over the last few years. Taking out a mortgage is the home value has significantly increased, and so there definitely are some benefits to that as well too. So I think it's important to recognize the difference between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt, it's a pretty easy guess, right? Credit cards. Credit card debt is probably the most common example of bad debt. The average credit card balance is almost $6,000 per person in the United States. It's bad, obviously, because of the high interest rates. It can make it incredibly hard to pay off. Car loans are kind of another example of bad debt because they're used to buy as an example that depreciates your vehicle. So the biggest thing with your car loans is try to avoid those high interest rates. Make as large of a down payment as you possibly can to avoid having to deal with that high interest rate and the higher costs month to month. Obviously, there's a lot of examples with bad debts as it relates to personal loans and payday loans. Payday loans are the big one. Those interest rates are so damaging, and it almost ends up keeping you in a cycle of debt. So, I think it's important to differentiate between the two. So, if you're an individual that's on the webinar and you have a variety of different debts, recognize that maybe the mortgage that you're stressing about. I don't know your full situation, but it could be considered good debt, and you maybe don't need to stress too much about that. Or same with the student loans. At least for the sake of today's conversation, we're really going to be focusing a lot on that bad debt, especially that credit card debt. But I think that this is a valuable point to make between good debt and bad debt, and not really stressing yourself out so much on some of these perceived overall debts that we do have. Reducing debt, requires a combination of some strategic planning, really disciplined budgeting, and mindful financial habits. I'm going to talk a little bit about at the end, especially about that mindfulness in terms of our financial habits. I'm not going to sit here and say the cliche, you need to budget and let's cut down on our Starbucks spending. Like, of course, that has an impact. But at the very end, again, I'll emphasize a lot of it is a mindset shift. A lot of us are so used to spending, and we really need to shift our mindset if we want to attack our debt as much as we say we do. There are a lot of external resources out there, but be very, very cautious of third-party vendors promising to get rid of your debt quickly. You see the commercials online all the time about folks being able to eliminate your debt. Be very, very cautious. There are a lot of great resources out there. There are a lot of great partners out there that will help you manage your debt, but make sure you're doing your research as to which company you're engaging with. At the very end of the presentation, I'll share on our resources slide one of our trusted partners that helps with folks on debt management plans. But again, just be very cautious of some of those infomercials, the radio ads, or some of the social media stuff that you're seeing, because it's not always in good nature. One thing I want to preface before we start diving into some of the strategies for decreasing our debt. It's going to potentially be, depending on your situation, a long, process in getting out of debt. It's not an easy one. It's not a sprint. It's definitely a marathon. And patience is needed, but there definitely is a path to getting rid of your debt or getting your debt to a little bit more of a manageable situation, alleviating some of that stress and anxiety. Okay, so first things first, we need to begin understanding our debt, essentially creating a little bit of a debt inventory. A debt inventory is a list of all of your debts and your liabilities or things that you owe to others. Debts can be divided into a variety of different categories, and some of them are listed here. Credit cards. These include all of your credit card balances and interest rates. I'm going to share on the next slide an example of what a debt inventory is going to look like, but I'm going to go through it here line item by line item. You're definitely going to list all of your personal loans. These include any loans that you have taken out for personal or business purposes, such as student loans, car loans, home equity loans, other business loans, etc. You're also going to want to list some of your accounts payable. This maybe is money that's included that you owe to others for goods or services that they've provided to you. Now, not like if you're doing it personally, you're not going to list your cable bill or your PG&E. But let's say that you have another type of um, uh, account that you owe money on, and someone did something for you and you owe them a balance still, you're going to want to include that. Essentially, to summarize, as the first sentence or the first paragraph up there talks about, if you owe something, money to others, you're going to want to make sure you list it. For each debt category, you're going to want to record a lot of the following information. So you're going to want the name of the credit card or lender. You're going to want the amount that you owe. You're going to want the interest rate, and you're going to want that minimum payment. So what this debt inventory is going to look like is right here on this screen right here. As you can see, it's all listed out. And again, this is a hypothetical situation. And you can see how, when beginning to list out the debt, what this looks like. Each category is recorded. You're going to have the name of the type of debt. You're going to have the amount that's listed. You're going to have the interest rate. And then you're going to have the minimum payment that's required. We do this because it helps us realize how much we're paying monthly for our debt, and it gets us sort of organized. Um, this example is pretty large. There's a few different credit cards that we can see. There's a line of credit. There's a couple student loans, and then there's a term loan as well too. And just making the minimum payments, this individual is paying almost $3,000 per month just on the minimum payment. That's a significant amount of money, as we can see. This doesn't include, obviously, some of the other debts. Maybe it's a home, a mortgage that they might be paying on, or some other items. So you can imagine the financial commitment that this person is making towards their debts, and what else they could be doing with this money aside from paying down, or aside from throwing it all at financial institutions. And so you can see quickly how people are very stressed about debt. You can see quickly how this affects people's health. And it's an important thing that we want to make sure we get under control. So for you that's on the call, that's listening, and maybe you have a few debts that you wanna decrease, the biggest thing that you can do, again, the first thing you want to do is make sure you give yourself a debt inventory. List your debts. Maybe you owe on a Chase credit card. Maybe you owe on a Wells Fargo credit card. Maybe you owe on a personal loan or a student loan. Make sure you're listing that all out with the amount, again, the percentage that you're paying, and then the minimum payment. If you don't know where to find this information, just go to your financial institution's account. You probably are getting statements for your credit card payment. pull up that statement and you can see the rate that you're paying. You can see your total amount and you can see the minimum payment that you owe. So replicate that for a few of your debts, and this will be able to provide you a good starting point as we begin to approach our paying down debt. Any questions on this right here? Okay. Again, as always, feel free to drop them in the chat if you do have any. But first things first, create this debt inventory, and this right here is what it's going to look like. After we've done that step, let's talk about thinking about some of the goals that we want to accomplish. You know, a good debt repayment goal should be something that's specific, that's time bound, that's realistic based on your current financial situation or your priorities. Um, Here's a few things to consider when and setting up your goals. You might want to make sure you define a clear target. You want to make sure you give yourself a time frame because it helps you hold yourself accountable. Leaving it open ended by just saying I want to pay off my $5,000 credit card bill. That's too open ended. Do you want to pay it off in 6 months? Do you want to pay it off in 12 months? Are you going to pay it off in 5 years? Give yourself a time frame so that you can hold yourself accountable and challenge yourself to accomplish that goal. So a great example, again, sticking with that $5,000 credit card bill. Let's say you want to pay it off in 12 months. You can begin to calculate how much you need each month. You're going to need $417 per month to pay off that $5,000 balance. Setting up goals is great because it provides that framework. It provides that roadmap on how we're going to get there. If you just again left it open ended and said I'm going to pay off $5,000, then you don't necessarily know how much you're going to pay each month, and it's not that much. There's not that much structure included in it. You also want to make sure you're setting them up to be realistic. If you have a large credit card balance that's $10,000 or $15,000 and you set it within a 12-month time frame, your current cash flow may not allow you to be able to pay that much every single month towards a larger balance. So we want to make sure they're very realistic. Once you've set up your debt inventory, you're going to get a better idea as to how much you can afford to pay and allow you to set up some of your goals a little bit more targeted. But setting goals as it relates to paying down debt is really a great strategy on our path to decreasing some of our debt. Okay, let's shift our focus here on some strategies. A bulk of our presentation here is going to focus on these next 3 or 4 slides. And this is really going to talk about some of the methodology that we may want to adopt as we begin to think about ways in which we can decrease our debt. You've created your debt inventory. You've set a couple goals for yourself. Now let's talk about some common strategies that are out there that allow us to actually decrease those balances and get on that path towards being debt-free, or at least having our debt in a manageable space. There's 2 different methodologies or strategies that folks commonly know about. It's either the snowball or the avalanche method. So I'll start first with the avalanche method. This focuses on paying the loan with the highest interest rate first. When the higher interest debt is paid off, you put that money towards the account with the next highest interest rate and so on until you are done. So by focusing on loans that are the most expensive, you should be able to pay less over time by addressing those highest interest rate loans. Depending on your debt situation, there's a school of thought that you may save more money with the avalanche method, seeing as you're decreasing you're addressing that higher interest rate loan first. It could be very discouraging with this plan because the principal is so large. But again, in the long run, you can potentially save money by using the avalanche method. Maybe paying off smaller debts is something that is appealing to you and it feels a little bit more rewarding. You might see more immediate progress, and that could work with the snowball method. So the snowball method simply means you're paying off the smallest of all your loans as quickly as possible. Once that debt is paid off, you take the money you were putting towards that payment and roll it onto the next smallest debt owed, and so on and so forth. So both of these strategies really just look at, do you want to tackle the highest interest rate first, or do you want to tackle the lowest balance that you have first? And then you progress down the line. Both of them kind of have a momentum theme behind them. Both of them, again, depending on your specific situation, either one can work for you. But again, it really just depends on where you stand with your debts and which avenue or which method you think is going to work best. This next slide right here shows us when we look at that example of the debt inventory that we had, these are broken down into avalanche or snowball. You can see on the left the avalanche method. We start listing with the highest interest rate. And to no one's shock, the two credit cards have the highest interest rate. They also have a couple of the highest balances. It looks like the student loan one's 14 and the other credit card is 16. Um, but you can see on the left the avalanche method, the two credit cards at the top with a almost 17% interest rate and a 13% interest rate. Um, that's those two right there, especially at the very top, are going to cost you the most amount of money over time because it's a high balance with a okay or recently high interest rate. On the left, you can see the snowball method. It looks at us tackling the balance that's the lowest, irregardless or not factoring in our interest rate. Again, it's important to understand, you know, each one could play different for your specific situation. In this example, I'm going to venture to guess that the avalanche method is probably going to save you more money over time because of the interest rate and because of the size of that balance. Whether the debt or snowball, whether the snowball or avalanche method is better really just depends on your specific financial circumstances. In terms of saving money, as I've emphasized, avalanche is probably better because it's going to save you money in the long run, targeting those highest interest rates. However, some people do find the snowball method to be a little bit more effective for them. They view it as maybe a little bit more motivating, and they can see that debt paid off a little bit quicker because you are tackling some of those smaller interest rates. Okay, let's continue on here with a couple other strategies. In these two examples, we're going to talk about a potential debt or like consolidation loan or a personal loan, and we're also going to talk about a potential balance transfer card. Um, Again, I want to preface and emphasize, as with all of these options, I'm never going to say the first option should be taking out a debt or personal loan. Maybe it will work for you, but again, you have to look at your given financial situation and your debt situation to make the best educated decision on which avenue is going to work best for you. But talking a little bit about a debt consolidation or personal loan. So a debt consolidation loan or a debt consolidation works by taking out a single loan in the amount to pay off your other debts. And so, consolidating debt with a personal loan kind of essentially means, exchanging one kind of debt for another. However, that does have its advantages. If you're able to qualify for a loan with an affordable interest rate and fair terms, it can definitely save you money in the long run. A lot of times for these loans, if you want to qualify for a personal loan, you do need to have a higher credit score. But qualifying for a loan in the amount of money that you owe in debts on a lower interest rate could be beneficial for you. And so let's run through an example of what that might look like. And you can see it right here on the left in this graphic, on the right, I'm sorry. And so I'm going to read through it. So imagine you have a credit card with a $4,000 balance, and it's at a 32% interest rate, very high. You have a second credit card with a $6,000 balance, and it's a 20% interest rate. You are only able to put towards, the minimum payments, $347 towards each card per month. It's going to take you a little over, as you can see on the graphic, a little over 50 months to pay off, and you're going to in interest pay a combined, what is that, $7,600 in interest combined, and you'll have paid a total amount of over $17,000 by the time it's all done. It may seem like you're in quicksand, you're getting frustrated, which is totally understandable. So I think what the personal loan can do if you qualify for it, you can qualify for a loan of $10,000 at an interest rate of 12%. Let's say you keep that monthly payment of $347, the same that you were doing on the two credit cards. You'll be able to pay that off in 35 months, and you'll have only paid $1,885 in interest, totaling $11,885 in total, and you'll save almost $6,000 just by chipping away those two interest rates, the 32 and the 28%. So this is a perfect example of how a loan can help you manage some of these high interest, high balance credit cards that you may be dealing with. Again, breaking down with this type of math, you can see it's beneficial for you. Not everyone's situation allows for this. So that's why I always preface, let's make sure that we're doing some of our research ahead of time to make sure that we're making the best decision for ourselves. I have a little note in here as of earlier in the week, February of 2025, the average interest rate on a personal loan is 15.9. So it is creeping up. A lot of factors depend on your credit score and the institution that you're going to. But regardless, even if it's at 15.9 or 16%, it is less than these two interest rates, as you can see, 32 and 28. So many folks have utilized this option. For some, it works. For some, it doesn't. It really just depends on your given situation. Another avenue I want to talk about here, and it's something that's, sorry, apologies. Another avenue that I really want to talk about here, and it's something that folks have been using frequently as well too, is a balance transfer card. Um, a balance transfer card allows you to move your debt from one credit card to another, and you're probably thinking, what's the benefit in that? Oftentimes, balance transfer cards allow you to move from one credit card to the other, where the other credit card has a 0% interest rate for potentially 9 to 21 months, even longer. This allows you to save money on paying interest and pay off debt faster. So it's really a great resource to get rid of having to worry about paying interest for a set amount of time. A quick Google search, most financial institutions offer balance transfer cards, but a quick Google search using the publication NerdWallet, and they compare a lot of the popular balance transfer cards that are available right now, and they share all of the promo rates. So one caveat that I want to make sure I emphasize with balance transfer cards is there is a balance transfer fee which you will be paying. So if I have a $6,000 balance on a credit card at a very high interest rate, and I want to move it to a balance transfer card that has 0% interest for 21 months, I will potentially be paying a fee of anywhere between 3 to 5% to transfer that balance. When you begin to do the math, it's minimal compared to how much you're going to save on not having interest for 21 months. So that's really the big caveat for balance transfer cards. You will be paying a balance transfer fee, but it is important to understand that with 0% interest for up to 21 months or even 2 years, you can save a lot of money in the long run and really get ahead on some of your debt. One of the last things I want to emphasize with the balance transfer card as well too is your credit score does matter, as the same with a personal loan. You may only qualify for certain balance transfers depending on your specific credit. So that's one thing to note as well too. Your terms and conditions may change depending on the level of credit that you're at. So there are definitely some pros and cons to each of these options. For a personal loan, you are kind of replacing one debt for another, but you're able to decrease that interest rate. And in that first example, as you saw, you could potentially save upwards to $6,000. For a balance transfer card, you're consolidating your debt onto one single card, and it can make your payments more efficient, and it can save you money on interest, which is a good thing as well too, allowing you to potentially pay that debt down faster. Are there any questions as it relates to these two options? Because I know that's a lot of information here, um, and I want to make sure that I'm able to answer any questions that you may have regarding these two options. Feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box if you do have questions. So it looks like we have one here that talks about where can I find the best balance transfer card. Yeah, so there's a few different options. You can first initially just maybe check with your financial institution, your primary financial institution, if they have one. But as I mentioned, a quick Google search of best balance transfer cards. Um, a variety of publications compare them every single month, but the one that I really like to utilize is NerdWallet, and it'll show you who has a good balance transfer card offer, and it'll break it down by some of the details that are included in that specific offer. It's a pretty simple process, but just want to make sure that you all recognize that you can use that NerdWallet, and it can show you some of the specific details. Might you know how much these balance transfer fees are for a um, a balance transfer? So it's not universal, but at least when I've seen balance transfers offered, they're anywhere between 3 to 5%. At least the fee for that balance transfer. So depending on the size of your balance that you're transferring over, um, more often times than not, it's okay to pay that fee just because you recognize that 0% interest for that length of time, 12 months, 18 months, 21 months, 24 months, it definitely makes up for it. Looks like we have a couple more questions coming in here. What if I don't qualify at all because my debt to income ratio is too high? So I don't. So that's a unique question. As it relates to being able to qualify for these two options, um, I they're going to look at your credit, and are you unable to qualify because your credit isn't that great? I guess I'm a little confused by the question. Got you. Got you. So for some of these options, and maybe you're in a situation like you're describing where you aren't able to qualify because of a credit score. I have a resources slide at the end. It's one of our trusted partners. They're called GreenPath, and so I'll share that information with you. But they help create a debt management plan. Um, and they're able to allow you some strategies for decreasing your debt without using these two options, maybe. It sounds like you may need to enlist the assistance of maybe an outside party to help with you. And so I'll make sure I share that information, or you'll get that information at the very end. But I guess, again, without knowing your specific situation, you may want to just kind of reevaluate or look at some other options. I don't know how many times you've tried to utilize whether it's a balance transfer or a potential personal loan. But I feel like depending on the financial institution, they may work with you, recognizing that a personal loan could be the key to kind of allowing you a little bit more flexibility in repaying your debts. So first things first, I would kind of take a look at your primary financial institution and see if there's an option for you to potentially get a loan, recognizing that maybe your credit isn't the best, but they might be willing to work with you a little bit more on that. And then the next step is, I would definitely reach out to GreenPath, and I'll make sure I share that information at the very end. Great questions. All right, let's go ahead and jump. Keep the questions coming if you do have them as well too. Let's go ahead and as we begin to kind of wind down the webinar here, I do want to talk about a few more slides. Um, I think it's important to recognize that once you're on the journey towards decreasing your debt, One of the best things you can do for yourself is avoiding taking on new debt. We see it all the time. At least I do when I'm out chatting with folks in the community. They've done a great job at buckling down and paying down their debt, or they've done a balance transfer and they've freed up a new credit card and they just kind of go back to spending again. And that's just the worst strategy that you can take. And so there's a couple different things that I want to emphasize. I told you I wasn't going to sit here and preach on budgeting, and I'm not, but I do think having at least the outline of a budget can go a long way for reducing your spending, especially as it relates to putting things on credit cards. Creating a budget allows you to see where your money goes and eliminate a lot of that unnecessary spending. We oftentimes see that credit card debt was created by unnecessary spending. So creating a budget allows you to see where that money is going and make the necessary decisions to shift that desire to want to put everything on a credit card. Creating an emergency fund, putting a small amount of money aside um, every single month or every time you get paid to help alleviate the financial shock when you get an unexpected bill, can help decrease some of those credit card balances or those loans, which can turn into long-term debt. I was just chatting with a neighbor who, they had an unexpected car repair that popped up and didn't really have the funds, and so they had to put it on a credit card, and they have a plan in place to at least decrease that credit card balance a little bit, but they're a little bit frustrated that they have to put everything on the credit card, and the neighbor expressed they wish they had like a savings account that was solely for the vehicle or solely for your pets or something like that in case there is an emergency that does come up. Lastly, and I kind of talked about it at the very beginning, it's really that mindset shift. One of the most important ways to avoiding new debt or really kind of getting out of debt is shifting your mindset, moving away from the impulse purchases and using your money with more intention to achieve your financial goals. Our society nowadays is such a spend now and immediate gratification that we don't recognize kind of some of the decisions that we're making until it's a little too late. I'll touch on this a lot in next month's presentation on the psychology of spending, but I really think it's important that we begin to shift our mindset a little bit as it relates to how we use our funds. As we begin to close out the webinar, I did want to share this resources slide. I can't emphasize GreenPath enough. So they are a partner of Sesloc's. They are a free resource for Sesloc members. Reach out to them. You can see the phone number that's listed right there on the slides. This is a screenshot from our website. So if you go to sesloc.org, there's a tab that has financial education and debt management plans and things like that. Click on that section, and it'll take you to this page right here, and it'll guide you straight to GreenPath. They're going to help create a personalized, tailored program for you. Again, they give examples of maybe you're dealing with foreclosures or overwhelming debt. They're going to help create a plan for you and a journey to help get you out of that credit card debt. So if you're someone that's attending now that it speaks to you, this is speaking to you, I would highly encourage you reaching out to GreenPath. They're a great trusted resource. We hear from them all the time. They share with us and give us updates that obviously all the information is confidential, but they'll share with us that Sesloc members are reaching out and they're getting them on plans and allowing them to become debt free or at least starting that journey. So I can't speak highly enough about GreenPath and trusting them to help us with some of these debt management plans that we need. Lastly, I want to open it up to any questions. I know we got to some throughout the presentation, but if there are any more that do come up, please feel free to put them in the question and answer box now. So we have another question here. Let's see. They're asking about the avalanche method and if it, let's see. Let me try to read it. Um, which method saves more money, the avalanche or the snowball method? Yeah, so again, a good question. We oftentimes see that the avalanche method is what's going to save you more money in the long run if you have multiple credit card or multiple debts. The reason being is those high interest rates. If you have a credit card with a high balance and a high interest rate, or even a moderately high balance and a high interest rate, sorry, then more often than not, you're going to save money by using that avalanche method. Um, Debt is almost like feeling in quicksand, and it's traditionally because of those high interest rates with high balances. That's what keeps us in this cycle. We are paying minimum payments, um, and these minimum payments aren't making much of a dent in the principal amount, in the overall amount that's on the card. And so that's why the avalanche method is so effective, because we are tackling those debts with the highest interest rate. So that was a long answer to your simple question. It really depends on the specific situation, but oftentimes the avalanche method is what's going to save you more money over the long run paying down these debts. Good question, though. Okay, another question. What is the impact on credit score when using balance transfer method? So, that's a great question. It really just depends. It can have an impact. So, because you are applying for a credit card, you're going to get a hard inquiry on your credit. We know that we are dinged slightly on our credit score when we apply for a loan because there is a hard inquiry. So it could potentially decrease your score, but very, very slightly. One other thought that we may want to look at is you are expanding your available credit. The amount of available credit that we have um, is a good thing for your credit score. So it, I don't want to say it evens it out. However, if anything, it may ding your credit score slightly. But again, the long-term view of being able to decrease your debt, um, I think far outweighs the slight ding on your credit that it may have in the short term, if that answers your question. Um, I've seen situations where it doesn't really impact it much at all. I've seen situations where it may decrease it 4 or 5 points. But again, if the end goal is, and if you're struggling with credit card debt, and if the end goal is to really decrease that, I personally would take a little bit of a ding on my credit score to be able to know that I have a path forward or at least a plan in place to know that I can decrease my overall balances quicker, and saving more money. A great question. Okay, we got another question here. Does Cesslock offer personal loans? And if they do, what is the current interest rate? So we do. I have to pull up the rate here, the rate terms. But to answer your question, yes, we do offer loans. Um, let's see. It's going to take me a second to pull it up because I'm kind of doing it on a separate screen. But we do. To quickly answer your question is we do. Yes. Another question here. Can we contact you to review our situation? Um, I'd be happy to connect you with GreenPath. I don't think it's, I don't know if I want to be the person to review your specific situation. I can answer questions, definitely. Let me reply back to you with my email address. Um, and I'll make sure I send it privately as well, too. There you go. Again, I would probably end up referring you to GreenPath, but I'm happy to help answer questions regarding your situation. Of course, of course. Let's see. I got the personal loan rate sheet up here. So for one of our signature loans, a personal loan for up to 60 months, I mean, we're hovering anywhere between 11% to 18%. Again, a lot of that I'm sure really just depends on your credit situation. I hope that answers your question. But yes, we do offer personal loans, and again, um, that rate is really just gonna really depend on your credit situation. Another question here: does it make sense to obtain a balance transfer with same credit card company that I owe? Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes much of a difference, to be honest with you. Whichever card you company you go with. Um, Really just take a look at what terms work best for you. If you recognize that the balance transfer fee is something you're okay with paying with, and understanding that you're going to have 21 months or to 24 months potentially of interest free, and really be as aggressive as you possibly can in paying that down. I don't think it really matters which company you go with. No. Um, a big thing that I want to make sure I share, and I think it goes without saying, but um, once that promotional term of 21 months or however long it is of 0% interest ends, your interest kicks back in that very next month. So be aware that the balance that you are, if you haven't paid off that balance in full, the 22nd month you may be accruing interest. So either have a plan in place to make sure that debt is paid down significantly or all entirely, or have a plan to sorry, you know move that balance again if necessary. I don't recommend the balance transfer card jump to jump every single time, but make sure that there's a plan in place to decrease that debt significantly. Great question. Any other questions here? Those are all great. I've got a few more minutes, so I'll stick around here in case any do come up. But again, I really appreciate you all joining. I hope that you pulled something from this presentation. I know debt's tough. I think we've all been there. We've all been in a situation where we made mistakes and our spending got the best of us, or we had an emergency that came up. Um, and so we've all kind of been there. And so I hope that there's at least a few strategies that you could pull from this, that you can utilize in your specific situation. Um, Always, 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 if you need to stop into the branch and just ask questions about your specific situation, don't hesitate to do so. I would assume most of you are members. If you're not, again, we are a community-based financial institution, and our main goal is to make sure that we're serving our members and the community. So we're always willing to help and answer any questions. I would recommend setting up an appointment if you need to chat with one of our member service representatives about your situation. But we're always here to help. Again, March 19th is I believe it's March 19th. Yes, is our psychology of spending. We're going to be again looking at the factors that encourage us to spend, like advertising and social media and all that stuff. So that'll be a really great presentation. But again, thank you all for joining so much. Um, and then keep an eye out for the recording, which will be ready shortly. Last call for questions. All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Thank you.